Hello, well I've got a new sewing machine. Well, it's new to me. It's actually 1960, so about 60 years old, and it's an old Singer. You know, I thought what I'd do in this film is show you the sorts of things I look at when I first get an old machine, and the sorts of things I might think about replacing and generally sorting out and overhauling. I'll explicitly cover also the replacement of the tension unit, because I think this one's not in the best condition, so I'll run through in a bit of detail replacing that. I did pop up an earlier film, probably about 5 years ago now, of the Singer 31K, where I show you how I retime this type of machine if its timing's out. This machine, it's a newer machine than the 31K that I showed in one of my other films, and it's the 331K. So 1960, in an industrial machine. It's built like a tank. It's an old Singer, it would be. And it came on a huge table, which is going to become a workbench. And the reason for that is I don't have the space. So I'm going to keep it just as it is, machine head only. And I'm going to put a hand crank on this machine. I'll show you in this film how I do that as well. So covering and skipping quite a lot of ground. Let's get straight in. I'll say a little bit about the oiling first of all. Now this poor machine was as dry as a bone. It really was. It had obviously not been oiled for ages and ages and ages. And so what I did, I went around all the oiling points with some white machine oil, and I left it sort of like soaking for a while, and then every day I'd go into my workshop and just turn the crank handle a few times by hand, put some more oil on it. So I have been really drenching it and moving it, and it's just because it was so totally dry. What you'll find with some of the old machines, they've got like little string come felt wicks on them, and very often these get a lot of sort of crud and wax and other debris falling on top of them, which actually stops the oil going through. So it's worth using a little pointy tool of some sort, screwdriver or something, and just prising these up. And then what I do is I literally just cut the tops off so you get a fresh new wick exposed, and then I just tuck it down again. And then when you come to oil it, the oil will have a new wick to go down, and it will actually get onto the relevant components. So it's just something to look for. Very often it's missing. When you put the tool down the hole, there's nothing there, but sometimes you'll find these little pads. So if you do, it's worth cleaning them and then popping them back in and putting the oil in. So went through the whole machine. It's fairly obvious because you get these oil holes where you should be oiling, but what I also personally do is I get the manual, which always has an oiling chart. So you can download these manuals, and you can also get like an exploded diagram of your machine, and you can again work out wherever there's a moving part, chances are it will want some oil. So this isn't an oil bath machine. It's not one with lots of wicks where it wicks the oil in. You do have to oil each point. And in fact, in the manufacturer's manual, it talks about oiling them twice a day when they're in a factory environment, which I thought was quite interesting. So yeah, plenty of oil. The bearings are plain bearings, so obviously again, they want to be bathed in oil. And you can turn it upside down, get oil underneath, etc. So that's oiling. Worth spending some time on that. Give it several doses if it's an old looking very dry, and then you'll be away. What I have done so far otherwise on this is I've given the machine a general clean up with some chrome polish, a bit of brass polish, a bit of sandpaper, just to try and get all the old tobacco stains off and to generally try and get it a bit fresher. Let's swing down to the tension unit, because what I'm going to do is replace this, and we'll do that next. So here's a tension unit. You might be thinking, why am I going to replace it? Because it does work. But what I'm finding is at the moment when I stitch, my stitches aren't 100% consistent on tension, And what very often happens, it's a few little problems really with these as they get old. The washers get debris on them, so they're not of a like a uniform surface, and they sort of grip the thread more in some areas of the disc than others. The little axle itself gets worn. The spring loses its bounce. It may look okay, but they tend to sort of lose their little springiness as they get older and get not quite so bouncy, and it just becomes more difficult to keep your tension. And the other thing that happens is the little pin inside this, so here's the replacement unit, the little pin that keeps those washers apart gets worn. So I've got a replacement unit here. It's fairly straightforward to replace them, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'll just get the thread out of it first of all. Oops, there we are. Now, to loosen off this tension unit, there's a screw in the side here, and I may need, oh no, I have got it. You just have to undo it because there's a ridge. Back it off a fair bit, and then you'll find with any luck you can pull this unit out. Yeah, it's coming. Sometimes you have to give them a little bit of a sort of jolt. If I look at it here, you can see it's quite sort of gunky on the back, and you get gunk in this hole and the pin starts to seize. The spring isn't bad actually, but these washers again have quite a lot of muck around them. So you could polish it up, but as I want to use this quite a lot, I do want to have it working nicely. So I'll pop this unit in, but what I'll find probably is that this pin is far too long, so I'll need to take it down. If you look at the one that's coming out, the pin is almost flush with the body. Well, I think that's worn down a bit, but I certainly need to take 2, maybe 3 millimeters off of that pin and just round it very slightly. And I can do that using a Dremel drill, just a little angle cutter to cut it off. I'll first of all just do a test fit. So at the moment I've just placed this tension unit in position to show you. If you look inside, the little pin is just now where my screwdriver's pointing. Hopefully you can just see that on camera, and it touches a little cam. So I've just taken that pin down a little bit, and I can now fit this tension unit back in. And the installation, it's really just a reverse of taking it out, so carefully feed it into the little hole, keep the little tension spring that side. We can fine tune it later, and then just do up the screw on the side, and that will lock it in. And that's one nice new tension unit all in there. So it's a fairly easy job, and you can just test it to make sure it's working. So at the moment it's locked, those washers are close together. If I raise the presser foot upward, they're now lovely and loose. So that's doing its job. That little pin is pushing those washers to loosen them, and that's it tight. So that's all working very nice. That's the new tension unit. Now to turn this machine into a hand crank, I need to fix a handle on the end. Some people bolt a metal bar across, and then they have a machine handle they make to go on the end. What I've done is slightly different, in as much as I've taken this handle with a stem. Now you may be looking at this and thinking, that looks vaguely familiar. Well, it is, because what it is a leather worker's mallet. So it's one of those mallets you hit for leather stamping, etc. I'm just using the metal core and the handle, so I'm discarding the head of that. And what I've done, it's obviously got a nice screw thread on it. I've put in some washers, and I've drilled a hole in the wheel here and tapped it, and I can now screw this on. I'll tighten that, and then on this end a spring loaded washer and another nut. So I'll tighten that lot up and I'll have a nice rotating handle. So the idea would be I'll be able to use the machine hand crank style. I say that's just using the core of a leatherworker's mallet. Using the original handle gives you a nice handle. So fairly straightforward, but actually very effective if you want a machine which doesn't take up much space. You can go really slowly, because obviously you can just turn it at whatever speed you want to turn it at and get a lovely good slow result. The only downside, I guess, really is the fact that you're losing obviously one hand to work the machine, whereas with an electric motor you're using your feet. But there you are, take your choice. So that's the handle all fixed on. Final main area for attention is the shuttle. What I very often find actually is that the bobbins can get quite rusty and they don't sort of go smoothly in the actual shuttle, and sometimes you get dirt and debris, so one can clean it out and that normally makes them a lot better. But sometimes the spring starts to go a bit, this one's not too bad, or the hole gets slightly misshapen in the middle there. So again, and the leaf spring loses a bit of its bounce, you've got sort of wear issues creeping in. Now this one, it's fine I feel as a spare, but what I've done, I've bought one of these sets where you can just get a whole lot of bobbins and a new shuttle, and it's like job done. You know that you can get a consistent tension off of that shuttle, and the actual holder there, it's quite nicely made. Springs all good, nice clean. Bobbin going in there. So I'll pop that in. It will hopefully make it a bit happier. The kit comes with a new hook as well. So I think I will have a quick look at the hook on this machine and just see what condition it's in. I know it's been replaced at some point because with the machine came some old bits, which this is one of them. So I suspect what's there isn't bad actually, because it's all been replaced. That's the bit there in the middle, but I will have a quick look just in case it looks a bit rough. So I'll do that next. Well, the easiest way to get at this is to put the machine on its side, and you can undo these two screws here hopefully to get it off. Yeah, coming off all right. If nothing else, I can give it all a good clean up, which should be quite useful. And out it comes. So it's just a chance now to inspect all of these parts for wear, so I can compare the old with the new, and then check this as well. This can do with a clean inside. So to clean it, I'm going to use a bit of rag. I'll put a screwdriver just around the corners everywhere to get little bits of built up debris out. Be careful not to scratch it. And use little cotton buds as well, just give it all a jolly good clean up. Then I'll re-oil it, test the components and reassemble. It's interesting actually, the new hook has far less sideways play on it, and so I think it's definitely worth popping the new one in. The other thing I noticed on very close inspection is when you look at the new one, and this may be quite hard to see on camera, the new hook is the one at the top here where my thumb is. It's a lot sharper than the old one. It's very markedly so. Now that's the hook that picks up the thread from the needle eye, so it needs to be sharp to work well, otherwise you'll get dropped stitches. So I'm definitely going to put this new one in. Obviously it's a new component, it's going to need to bed in, so I'll have to be quite generous with the lubrication while it beds in, but it's definitely worth popping that in. Well, 2.5 hours later, this is the following morning. I slept on this one. I had real trouble trying to refit the hook. So this is the old one, which was a spare that came with the machine, and that's what the hook looks like. It's a little bit that goes round in the case there, and the little point on the end actually hooks the cotton from the needle, or the thread from the needle. Anyway, I just couldn't get it to fit, and I was using the replacement one of these that came with this little box of bobbins, etc. And I think there's probably a little bit of a moral here, because I mean this was a cheap Chinese purchase, and when I looked at them very closely this morning, the fresh wisdom of daylight, as you know, when you sleep on things, as I wondered overnight, I did have a think about it, it was just curved very slightly differently behind the hook. And what it meant was, basically just now I've had to file a section out of it to make it usable and grind a bit off the end, and it now fits and it's now turning and it seems fine. But I've had to adapt that. Now if that doesn't work well, I still have the newer one that I took off the machine. This hook, I'll come in a bit more to camera, this hook was a bit blunt, so I've put a file on it just on the under edge to try and get more of a point on it. So if I do reuse that one, hopefully it'll be a bit better. But I think if the one I've put in doesn't work, I'll try this one, and frankly I won't waste any more time. I'll just buy a new one of these, a Singer original part, and pop it in. So final things I'm doing now, I'm going to put a new needle in the machine. I always say, if in doubt, something's going wrong, try a new needle, because very often if they're very slightly bent, that's where your problem can be. Well, in the end I've actually loaded up a bobbin using one of my other machines, because I need to sort out a bobbin winder for this machine, but it's all gone on okay. So I'll load it up underneath there, it clicks in, that's on. So just a quick demo of how this works. Oops. So there you are, that's the stitching. Fairly happy with that. And on the back. So yeah, seems to sew nicely. I'm going to convert it to a roller foot next, and that will be in the next film. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next film.